Joining me now for more on this is James Brown. James, thanks very much for your time this morning. Let's start on these protests. We've seen different parts of the world protests place huge pressure on authoritarian regimes, notably Hong Kong. Are the Iranian protests going to get to that level, or there's just not widespread enough?
Not yet, Tom, but they have been sustained. There's been protests through the back half of 2019 across Iran, mostly in response to economic conditions that have been worsened by the extreme sanctions that the Trump administration has put on that country. But this is something new. To have protesters on the streets of Tehran calling, one of the things they were saying is death to the dictator, calling for their supreme leader to be killed, directly challenging their military leaders, that's rather unusual.
We're just going to stand by there. We're just going to go briefly to Justin Trudeau at the moment. He's speaking at the moment. I believe it's about the victims of this plane crash in Tehran that we're talking about. Let's have a listen in.
And was finally coming here for good, to build the best possible future for his kids. Except that he was on that flight. And now his family has no idea what their future holds without him. Friends, colleagues, professors and students here at the U of A, grappling to make sense of the brilliant minds taken from us, the careers of knowledge and teaching and innovation, cut tragically short. A devoted dad, raising his teenage son on his own, bewildered about what life means now that his boy was taken from him. Family after family, mourning the loss of a loved one who was not just shaping their own lives, but building this country. Every single one of those 57 stories, those 138 stories, those 176 stories, was one of hope, of strength, of confidence in a better future, a future we all share that is now diminished. 176 lives were extinguished in the space of a few minutes last Wednesday morning, but countless more victims all around the world, all across Canada, will suffer for years to come. Children, parents, siblings, friends, partners, who will now have to rebuild their lives after immeasurable loss. You may feel unbearably lonely, but you are not alone. Your entire country stands with you tonight, tomorrow, and in all the years to come. We will build that future they all dreamed of together. That's what Canada is. Lorsque le vol 752 a été abattu, les familles ont perdu ceux qu'ils aimaient, et notre pays.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is speaking French now, of course, but paying tribute to the, well, not just the Canadian victims, all victims there, as you heard, all 176 lives, all 176 stories at one of the crash memorials. I'm talking about this very topic with James Brown, and I'll get to a moment to that plane crash, but just on the Iran situation, I mean, the protests, they're not really just talking about, you know, one leader, are they? It's almost the system of government that's in question and the way Iran's run, and that's why it's nothing the regime will give up easily.
Well, I think one of the biggest points here is the response of the Iranian leadership to this crash. They came out and said that it wasn't shot down, that it wasn't an action on their behalf that had caused the downing of this jet and the loss of so many lives and so many Iranian lives. So that's been a big part of the criticism from the protesters, the fact that they can't trust their government to actually tell the truth, and that is driving a lot of the concern here. Not only is the government not delivering on the economic conditions that Iranians want, but it's also lying to the international press and to the world as well.
The dust has settled for now in this conflict, it seems. How do we sum this up? The US got their guy. There's no escalation for now. Thanks, though, to the Iran military, the civilian plane was shot out of the sky. Can you sum this up as a sort of mission accomplished with an asterisk for the US? What would you say?
Not quite. I mean, I think the implications of the strike in Baghdad will take some time to reveal themselves, not only for the US-Iran conflict, but for the wider way that countries prosecute war. It's okay now to assassinate leaders of states in very public places, and I think that's going to be an interesting principle in a world where more and more countries have armed drones. So we'll see what the ripple effect of that is. I think this Iran-US conflict will continue. The Trump administration has had a fortunate response to their actions. There hasn't been an escalation between the two, but whether that holds remains to be seen.
The justification, of course, was this so-called imminent attack. Overnight, we've had the US Defence Secretary saying he didn't see any specific attack evidence. He was pushed on this, and I'm not sure if he meant to admit it or not, but this seems to dismiss the reason for the assassination.
Well, the President's language on this was that and Secretary Pompeo's language on this was that there was an imminent threat, and that prompted the US to make the decision to attack General Soleimani at this stage. They would have been able to do this any amount of times before. Now the US Defence Secretary Mark Esper is saying, well, there was no specific intelligence. He hasn't seen evidence that there were specific threats against 4 embassies, as the President said in his interview on Fox News over the weekend. So there's a lot of reporting coming out now on the way this decision was made. It looks like it was an impulsive decision by the President, that it was one of a set of options that were offered up by the military. It was not one the military expected him to choose, but it was one the President chose quite impulsively. At this stage, it seems to have worked out, but the logic and the flow of events that led to this decision are still a bit unclear.
Is this something to keep an eye on now in an election year, James Brown, that's about to really heat up, that Donald Trump's diplomacy, and he wouldn't be the first president, let's not pretend that, could be impacted by his prospects in 2020?
Well, it gives the Democrats another way to beat him up. They're going to introduce some legislation around war powers, trying to constrain the President's ability to wage war. In this case, he didn't follow usual convention by briefing key senior congressional leaders ahead of the strike. It goes to helping them paint the picture that this is an executive who is out of control, who is not held accountable by anybody, particularly Congress. And you remember one of the impeachment grounds is that the President was obstructing Congress and not responding to the law of the land in regards to keeping Congress informed with documents. And this is just evidence of that pattern of behaviour, so it helps to add to the Democrats' case.
Indeed, hearing a Republican senator this morning speak about hoping he was getting a briefing, he couldn't get the information. They said it's too dangerous to tell you, even though he was in an underground bunker and had handed in his phone. Anyway, make of that what you will. I want to look at Taiwan, James Brown. Fascinating situation here, a strong victory for the President. There are economic implications in what Taiwan is doing in regards to pushing back against China. The voters seemingly don't care. They value independence a lot more.
Yeah, a huge result for Tsai Ing-wen, 8.2 million votes, one of the biggest results I think Taiwan's ever seen since it started having democratic elections, a resounding endorsement of her position. And she has been watching Hong Kong very closely in the protests there. Taiwan has been watching Hong Kong, and what they're seeing there is that the promise of one country, two systems just doesn't hold up. They don't want to be in the same position that Hong Kong is in. Whilst she won't formally declare independence or declare that they're on a path to independence, the President has said that they don't accept that there is a one country, two systems model for Taiwan, and the voters have overwhelmingly endorsed that. They've not only secured the presidency with a huge majority, but they've also secured control of the Taiwan Parliament as well, and they did it in the face of a lot of pressure from China, who sailed aircraft carriers through their aircraft carrier through the Taiwan Strait in the lead up to the election, and who's also accused of leading quite a large disinformation campaign in the lead up to the election as well, Tom.
The show of force clearly backfiring there. And nothing lost on the fact as well that China is telling other countries, hey, don't recognise this and this is my word, democratic election.
Yeah, I mean, President TAIWAN basically said it's time for other countries to start seeing us as a partner, not an issue. They are going to start to try and increase their linkages to other countries. There's only 15 countries in the world that formally recognise Taiwan as an independent state. They will look to broaden their economic, cultural, trade linkages with other countries. That's always been tough for the Taiwanese, but it does show, I guess, a degree of resilience for democratic systems in the face of a campaign against them by an authoritarian state.
Where should Australia sit on this then, given this election result? So many things going on that Australia's not all that keen on with China and can't take a stand on. Would we dare to wade into this area?
Well, I think Australia is certainly paying much more attention to Taiwan. There's been a lot more discussion about what sort of role Australia wants to play with Taiwan, particularly in the event of a conflict. The US is increasing its arms support to Taiwan, and there's a question around what would US expectations be of Australia in regards to any Taiwan contingency. I don't think you'll see Australia move to change its posture on its one China policy. That would be a significant move. But we have interests there. We have an office in Taipei, and it's a significant partner for us economically and in terms of resources as well.
More interesting developments as ever. James Brown from the US Study Centre. Appreciate your time today. Thank you.